Zamora Crawford Olin. I am the CEO of Crawford Olin LLC and the founder of the Growth Lab. And the Growth Lab is just designed to kind of support new market entrants who are interested in doing business with the government. So in here, we provide free training, services, templates, anything that we can to kind of push small businesses in the right direction. And all of our services are free. So if you know of anyone who are, I'm sorry, that is interested in getting into government contracting and need some support, definitely send them our way. So our guest this morning is Mr. Michael LeJeune. He is partner with RSM Federal, and he is also the author of Game Changers for Government Contracting. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
we've got,
Game
got
Changers for Government
yeah,
Contracting. He
we've
comes
got a
with like
couple
to
of
read,
books.
right?
Yeah, we've got a
Couple of
couple of
books.
books, and
They do. And
yeah,
I'm a proud supporter, I will say, of the books because of some great content
thank you.
in them. They do a great job of, I would say, like curating a great message from a lot of GovCon SMEs that you guys are definitely familiar with in our industry. But the industry is so big and yet so small at the same time. So
Yeah,
as much as we remember, we forget, and we have new people coming in every day. So the message is always timely for us. So I will go ahead and yield the floor to Michael. Welcome.
yeah. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's always good to come on and talk to some new faces, some old faces, and just to kind of share some messages with everybody. And I know today we're going to be talking about a little bit about raising the bar and what it takes to really be a game changer. And I just have kind of a short talk for you today. You'll notice I don't have slides because I hate PowerPoint, so I never do slides, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit, and I'm going to hit on 5 major points. So if you don't have a notebook and a pen, you're going to want to grab one. I tend to talk a little bit fast, and I'm just going to be giving you stuff that's fairly actionable things that you can do, but it's going to be a little bit of a checklist for you as well in your business. And so I'm not going to waste any more time talking about myself or anything else like that. I'll answer those questions if you have them. I'm just going to dive in and talk about a couple of points that I have for us today. One of the things that I think that makes people a game changer is having a proactive, so the key word there is a proactive pre-acquisition plan to government contracting. The average company that I talk to, and the average company is not doing well. The average company that I talk to has a reactive acquisition plan. And what that means is they're typically either in a bid matching system or on sam.gov looking for active opportunities. And the challenge with active opportunities is if you don't know the customer, you can't influence the acquisition. It's the bottom line. So the old complaint in government contracting is, well, it looks like it was written for Lockheed Martin. Well, it probably was. And the reason it was written for Lockheed Martin or whoever the company may be, fill in the name, is before the acquisition, so pre-acquisition, they had a plan. They were talking to the customer. They were shaping things that were eventually going to come out in the RFP. They were doing what we call ghosting capabilities, where they were saying, hey, when this comes out, you need a company that does this and does that. And they need to have this thing and that thing and this thing. And they're telling the government all these things that should go in the RFP that were probably unique to them. So that when the RFP comes out, it's written for Lockheed Martin. And it ticks off everybody else, but everybody else hasn't done the work. So if you want to be a game changer in this market, you need a proactive pre-acquisition game plan where you're talking to the customer, you're getting to know the customer, their challenges, all those types of things. You're going through their website, you're going through their forecast, you're having conversations with them. You're not just simply getting on your bid matching tool, finding an opportunity and bidding on it. That is not a proactive pre-acquisition plan. The next thing that I'll talk about is metrics. Your plan needs metrics. Most people, when I talk to them, I'll say, well, tell me about like your proposal process. Tell me about how many proposals you're doing, this, that, the other. And I get this deer in the headlights look. And I'll say, so on average, how many proposals do you do a month? And the answer a lot of times is 0. And so, like, how can you win if you're not swinging the bat? Like, you're not taking any shots, whatever metaphor you want to use. How can you possibly win if you're not chasing either an RFP, RFQ, RFI? Like, you're not chasing anything. You just have a website and your strategy is 100% based on hope. It doesn't work. So, like, you have to be actually taking swings at the plate. You have to be actually going after RFPs, those sort of things. And you need metrics to measure it, because most business owners that I run into, I'll say, so tell me about your metrics. And they're like, our revenue last year was X and our profit was Y. Like, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what are your metrics? And they just look at me like, well, that's a foreign concept to me. I don't understand. Okay, so let's break down some metrics. And some of the easiest metrics are, well, how many contracting officers did you speak to this week or this month? How many small business reps did you speak to? How many RFPs did you review? How many RFPs did you decide to actually chase? Things like that. There has to be a baseline set of metrics that you use to actually determine, if the actions you're taking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis are producing anything, because your actions produce some amount of results. And typically it's easy to see the results piece. Like, hey, we know we're making money, we're not making money. And I always go and say, well, that's a result of the work you did. What work are you doing? And that's where we have trouble nailing down the work we're doing. And most of the time, it's not enough. It's not enough conversations with the right people. And so if you're working 50, 60 hours a week and you're like, Mike, I can't work any more than that. Okay, it's maybe not that you need to work more hours. It's that you need to be smarter about where those hours are going. So you could actually probably reduce your hours in the business, but laser focus it on activities that produce results, and you're going to increase your effectiveness in the market. So what are your metrics, the key drivers, the key activities that drive your results? And that needs to be part of your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly plan that you're working on. You need a plan like that too. You also need to get clear on the value you provide. This is my third point here. And I usually say with metrics. A lot of companies don't have metrics that communicate the value they provide. A lot of times when I talk to a company, and again, let me pause for a second and say this. If you're hearing this, don't hear it and go, oh man, we're not a good company. If you're not doing anything that I'm saying right now, you should get excited, because it's an opportunity for you. If you start doing any of the stuff I'm telling you, you're going to increase your effectiveness. So again, if you're not doing these things, I'd be super excited, because that means this is an opportunity for you to apply this stuff and just go to a whole other level. So let's talk about the value you provide in the metrics piece. When I talk a lot to people, I usually get like a corporate overview that sounds like this. We were founded in 1985 on integrity and excellence to support the cybersecurity industry for the government, and blah, 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 blah. The clients that you're talking to totally tune out because they've seen that corporate overview probably 1,000 times, and I'm not even exaggerating. Hundreds of capability statements, hundreds of websites, and that is the normal corporate overview. We're founded in 1985, integrity, excellence in our industry, no other value. What we want to get to is the metrics, the things that make you stand out. So like when people ask me about RSM, I always talk about, hey, yeah, we're a coaching and consulting company for government contractors. Here's the metrics. Our clients have won over $3 billion in direct awards and another $30+ billion in IDIQs in just the last 8 years alone. And we've helped a little over 1,000 companies get in and successfully win contracts in this market in just the last 10 years. Now, those metrics make you go, man, those guys are pretty good. And then I can dig deeper and say, our founders and all of our coaches, the dozen coaches that we have on our board, are all Amazon #1 best-selling authors. And I could go deeper into that. But when I start sharing those little metrics like that, immediately, if you were considering two companies that do what I do, and one says we were founded in 1985 on integrity and excellence to help government contracts, win more government contracts. And then you heard me say how much we've helped them. Those folks are out of the game. You don't even want to talk to them anymore. And that's by design. And so the same thing when it comes to you positioning yourself with a government contract, when they see what you've done, there's just this wow factor. And that's what we want. We want a wow factor when you start delivering your message, your corporate overview, your 45-second pitch, whatever it may be. When you deliver it with metrics like that, all of a sudden, just boom, you're the front runner. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that struggle with this. So take a look at what you've done over the course of your business and start taking notes on that. There's a process we call competency mapping, where you go through your past performance, you start breaking these things down, and all of them have metrics. There are metrics for every industry that's out there. You just have to find them for you. And so I'll give you a quick example. I had a client of mine that said, well, Mike, we didn't, help, 1,000 clients win $3 billion and all this type of stuff. And so I started digging, well, what have you done? What have you done? And I started going through it with this one client, and he said, well, actually, they were in the oil and gas industry. He's like, we've actually successfully done over 500 projects in 27 states. And our safety rating is unbelievable for what we do. Like, nobody does what we do without injuries and accidents. And we've had, and I don't remember exactly how I described it, this particular safety rating for the last 12 plus years. And I was like, okay, so 500 projects. I was like, so tell me, how many of these lines have you installed? And he's like, well, we've installed over 2,000 miles of this pipeline in this particular state, and 2,000 miles here and 2,000 miles there. And next thing I know, we've got a metric. Okay, they've installed over 50,000 miles of this oil and gas pipeline. They've installed, over 500 tanks around the country. They've done this. And next thing you know, there's metrics that all of a sudden, when you read it, you're like, wow, we've done some really cool stuff. And everybody has that. And so you just need to look through your past performance and start to drill down and figure out what your common metrics are, and then just start adding them up. Another big one, we work a lot with IT companies. So we had one client that manages networks. And I said, so how many users do you manage around the country? And they're like, they started adding it up, and it was like 2,000 here and 5,000 there and 3,000 there. And they were like, wow, we manage over 500,000 users around the government. Like, that's a big metric. That's pretty cool. And so, there's just little things you can find in your business to actually prove the value you provide. So that was number 3. Let's talk about number 4 here. Is you actually need to get to know your customer. Actually need to get to know them. And what I usually tell people is it's super hard to get to know everybody in the government. That's why typically we use a data-driven approach to drill down. You can go in for free in sam.gov, go in the data bank, and find who your top 3 agencies are. And when you find your top 3 agencies, start there. I'm not saying in there, but start there with your top 3 agencies and say, okay, who are our top 3 agencies? Within those agencies, who are the top buyers in those top 3 agencies? And then start to get to learn your customer at every level. So there's the contracting officer, there's the program and project managers, there's a small business office. At a minimum, those are a couple of layers right there where you can start to get to know who the people are on the ground at your top agencies and get to know what their priorities are. I mentioned earlier, look at their website, look at their social media, connect with them on LinkedIn. If you're not on any other social media, you've got to be on LinkedIn, connect with them on LinkedIn. And when you're connected with contracting officers, program managers, all these different people, I chat them up on LinkedIn. I don't necessarily send everybody a direct message, but when somebody posts something, I'll like it. I'll comment on it. And it's not just, hey, thanks for sharing. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times, hey, this is a really important project you're working on, whatever it may be. And I'll do that for weeks before I ever make a phone call to a contracting officer or small business rep or whoever it is. Because once I have made a connection online and I pick up the phone and I call that person, like, oh, it's Mike from LinkedIn. I've already got a relationship with them. I'm promoting their social media stuff. And guess what? They're only getting 1 or 2 comments on their social media, a handful of likes, and I happen to be one of them. People notice that stuff. They write down your name, they take a look, they really do notice that stuff and they appreciate it. So when you connect with them and get to know what their priorities are, you can actually have better conversations with them. You can talk about future things, not just the stuff that is coming out for RFP today. You can get in that pre-acquisition mode and dig deeper into what's going on with your customers. So the fifth, that was number 4. The 5th thing that I'm going to talk about is your back office. And I can probably talk about 100 things here, but when it comes to your back office, this is one of the areas when I do assessments with people that I find is the weakest area of their business. No one likes to talk about your finances. Nobody likes to talk about your recruiting process. Nobody likes to talk about accounting. And those are all things that can really break your back when you start to chase a contract and you don't have those, those things squared away. So here's 4 main ones that I want to talk about in your back office. Number 1, it's expensive to onboard a new contract. I highly recommend that you have a credit line and you're constantly working at growing your credit line, because it's difficult to go get a bank loan. So let's say you just won a contract and you need to onboard 4 employees and you don't have the cash flow to make 4, 5, 6 paychecks to them. Well, it's going to be a minimum of 60 days before you probably get your first payment from the government, because they're going to want you to hire somebody, put them on site. They're on site for 30 days before you get the first invoice, and they have net 30 terms. So it's probably going to be 60 days before you get that first payment. Guess what? That's 6, 8 paychecks that have to go out. You need the money from somewhere. So a credit line is usually a great way to do it. And it really doesn't matter what interest rate you start at. Work with your bank, try to get the best interest rate you can, but get that initial credit line and grow that over time. I like to see my small businesses have 100,000 plus in credit line so they can onboard employees when they get new contracts. That's a big deal. And don't use the money for anything else. Don't use the money to go, buy office equipment or any of that kind of stuff. It's used to onboard contracts. Another one is having a recruiting process. So guess what? You just won your first contract and all of a sudden you have to put 4 FTEs on contract. Guess what you got to do? You got to hire 4 FTEs. How are you going to do it? Where are they going to come from? You need a recruiting process in place prior to winning the contract that you know how you're going to recruit. So it could be as simple as, hey, we use ZipRecruiter, we use this, we use that, whatever thing it is. And I'm not endorsing ZipRecruiter. I'm just using an example. We use Facebook groups, LinkedIn messages, whatever it may be. We are going to find a way that we are going to use to recruit the people that we need to fill slots. And you need to have that in place. You need at least generic job descriptions, salary calculated, all those types of things, so that when you win that contract, you can turn on your machine like that and not have to go, hey, we need a recruiting system, and waste 2-3 weeks figuring out the recruiting system. That needs to be in place, ready to rock and roll when you win a contract, so you're not wasting time. Third thing is your accounting system. You've got to have one. Let's start there. You've got to have some sort of accounting system in place. Some people use QuickBooks. If you're doing cost plus accounting, you're going to need the desktop version versus the online version. But you've got to have an accounting system in place. You've got to understand how you do your pricing and those sort of things. And again, you don't want to try to put that in place after you've won a contract. You need that in place so that your back office is squared away. And even before you approach the RFP, you know how you're going to do your pricing. You know how things are going to be calculated. You know how invoicing is going to go out. I just finished a podcast this morning, right before this, with Jenny Clark, and we were talking about this, where I said, I've walked into clients' offices and they do invoicing once a month. Guess what? That means you're only generating cash once a month. I recommend at least 3 times a month, usually like the 10th, 20th, and 30th of the month, to do invoicing, because now you're generating cash 3 times a month. Because you may have one invoice that goes out because one contract, it's billed on the 5th, one on the 15th, and one on the 25th. But you don't want to be the person that's only invoicing on the 1st of the month when you could be collecting all throughout the month. Because guess what? Your expenses are almost on a weekly basis. You have, your IT expenses going out. You have employee expenses going out. You have the IRS and the state dipping in your pocket for taxes. That's going out. And those are all going on all the time. You want income coming in at multiple times during the month, not just on the 1st. And so that's why we want to do invoicing at least 3 times a month. And you need a good accounting system to be able to manage that stuff. The last point I'll talk about here in your back office is your certifications. I talk to a lot of people that could get just about any certification you can name. I deal with people that are WSB, SDVOSB, 8A, Native American, Alaskan owned, Hub Zone, all these different things. And it's all stuff they could get, but they haven't done, or worse, they've self-certified. And the government is, if you haven't caught this, the government's quickly moving away from the self-certification in a lot of these areas. Some of them you already can't do, but they're moving away from all that, and they want you to have a formal certification. You've gone through a process and gotten this stuff. You haven't just merely said, oh, well, I qualify for that and I'm going to put it on the website. So if you qualify for a certification, go through the process to get it. If you do need help, there's plenty of firms out there that do it. We have partners that do it, and there's fees applied to that. But almost every single one of these things, you can literally do it on your own for free. It's just a matter of filing the paperwork. And so I just highly encourage people to go formalize that stuff, because somebody's going to knock on your door and want a piece of paper at some point, and you want to have it. So the 5 points I talked about: having a proactive pre-acquisition plan. Your plan needs to have metrics. I talked about getting clear on the value you provide with your metrics, actually knowing your customer, and then some prep for your back office. And so I know that was a little bit drinking from a fire hose because I talked really fast on that, but I hope that's really valuable for everybody. And I'll pause and take a break and answer some questions.
Thank you, Michael. That was awesome. You did give us a lot, but that's okay. I had your back. I made some quick notes and put them in a chat. So hopefully our attendees are able to kind of copy and paste that and put that into their own notes. So we do have one question from Don as it relates to employees. And the question is, do you recommend using employee leasing or a PEO firm?
So you're talking about your recruiting process there and stuff. So there's really no wrong way to do it. If you find something that really works for you, the thing is, when it comes to the contract, they need to be W-2s. And so I have seen people that say, oh, well, can I 1099 these people? Like, so let's say it's an SDVOSB contract or an 8A contract, and you've got to do 50% of the work. Those 1099s don't count. So you've got to have those people as W-2s. The only thing is, if you're sub, so like, let's say there's a sub to you and they're also an 8A, then you've got the whole similar situated entities, and that all counts towards that 50% goal. But the main thing is, when it comes to hiring the people, is they need to be W-2s, because you need to be doing 50% of the work normally. on those. So just whatever solution you use. I've seen people do all kinds of creative things. Here's the one piece of advice I have about the employee side of it is, don't be afraid to get creative with a firm that says, hey, the traditional headhunter, we'll go find this, but then we want a percentage of that salary. We want it up front. Every client I have that does that type of headhunting, I say, guess what? You're going to have to change your model. You're going to have to get more creative, because if I just onboarded a high paying role, let's say somebody that's going to get paid $150,000 a year, I don't have 10% of their salary to give you. I'm using my credit line to onboard the project and I'm not paying you out of my credit line. So can you make payments over 4 to 6 months, 12 months, whatever it may be? Don't be afraid to negotiate and push back on those companies and say, hey, I understand it's worth it. I understand the value. Can you partner with me on this? Better yet, I tell you what, would you take your fee? It's normally going to be $15,000. Would you reduce that to $2,500 if I also give you one of the FTEs on this? So I will actually sub to you. I need you to hire 2 people. One of them will be my W-2. I'll pay you $2,500 for that person. You get the other FTE and get the markup on that one. And let's do this a little creative. Don't be afraid
That
to
is
be creative.
creative.
Don't
That
be
is
afraid to be
creative.
creative.
But
Or
I'll say
yes,
too, a lot of you got to be careful when you're hiring, because especially if they're key personnel, and the contract will state in there that the government has to approve that person before they can be onboarded. So you can also state that, contingent upon this person being hired, then
exactly.
I'll pay you XYZ, because sometimes you can just get trash resumes or resumes that don't really align.
That's right.
And two, when you are dealing with people that are going to help you recruit, they have to really understand the positions that are being hired. So if they're not a subject matter expert in that area, they don't know what to look for. So they're not, they can't even look at the statement of work and make sure that the required responsibilities align with that person's capabilities. So you want to make sure that that they can definitely do that.
Yeah.
So
And I'll tell you on that same point, I've had clients that paid the large fee up front. This has only happened a couple of times, but it has happened before. They hired the employee. They were super excited. They paid the large fee up front. They got the employee on site. They're 60 days in and they get a letter from an attorney that says this employee has a non-compete agreement and
mm,
you cannot have this employee on this contract. And all of a sudden, you've paid $15,000 to have this employee. You didn't know there was a non-compete agreement, and you're not going to get the money back from that employee. Now you got to go back to the agency and say, hey, we need to replace Bob because Bob has a
yeah.
non-compete agreement. And okay, well, that'll be another 15,000.
And two, that makes me think you have to make sure your firm knows the right questions to ask, right?
Yeah,
Because they should have asked that question. So now
they
I'm
should
looking for
have.
a
Yeah.
little money back, me
Yeah,
myself.
you just never know. And yeah, don't be afraid to say, no, I'm not going to give you another 15,000. This was on you, or it was on
Hmm.
Bob, or whatever. I need you to replace this person. I need you to do it at cost.
Yeah. And so now our next question is how important are relationships, or how important is it to establish a relationship with the OSDBU, and that's Office of Small Disadvantaged Business
Yeah,
Utilization, or your small business office? And I would say it is very important. It is essential. Their whole reason for being is to serve as that intermediary between you, the small business, and the agency. So
yeah,
I feel like your small business person should know you by name.
yeah.
And when you are inside the government and understanding the procurement process before set asides are broken, and they will do that if they don't think they'll break the set aside or request to break the set aside if they
Right,
don't think that enough small businesses are interested. But a good OSDBU or small business specialist will say, oh no, I have a whole list of companies that are under NAICS code, 541611,
right.
that can do this work. And I'm going to deny your request to break that set aside. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I 100% agree with one caveat. In the caveat is everything that I see in government is just like in real life. They're all little these microcosms of society. You will run across a small business rep that is absolutely no help to you. You just will. Occasionally,
Yeah.
you'll run across one, and it doesn't matter what you say, what you do. I've come from the army, and we used to call them oxygen thieves. And we were like, man, this person is just zero help. They're not getting anything
Just
done.
taking up space.
Yeah, they're just taking up space. They're taking up oxygen. And sometimes it could be your approach. Sometimes it could just be that person. Sometimes something's going on in their life. We don't really know. So I would say that role is essential. But if you find that they are not influencing anything or making introductions or willing to help you, then yeah, definitely try to work with them. But if it's not working, then just move on and
Yeah.
focus on your relationship with the contracting officer, the program managers, those types of folks, because at the end of the day, those folks are the ones that are going to be making a lot of those decisions anyway. So just, and the same thing about the oxygen thieves applies to that area too. You'll talk to certain people in different roles, and I don't care what you do, what you say, they're just not going to help you. So that's why we want to be talking to people at multiple levels in an organization. And
Hmm.
so if one isn't helping you or is too busy,
Yeah.
there's other people there, and you're not going, well, this one person at the one agency won't talk to me. So what do I do? Well, there's other people there. And so don't get
Yeah.
hung up on it. Just that's why you need to have multiple relationships at these places so you can leverage it properly. So
And that's why it pays to get to know your organization, do your research,
yeah,
back to your point. And you can download the org chart. So
you
you
can
can actually
download the org chart.
see
Yeah, absolutely.
how that organization is set up. But what I found, Michael, is that sometimes it is cultural. I feel like every agency has its own buying culture. So you have
Yes,
some agencies that are very small business friendly. They go out of their way above and beyond to support small businesses. I won't name call because I have a few that I think are like that. But
yeah,
then you have some where, because of the mission of the agency, they don't have time to kind of do that hand holding. So
right,
if you are brand new to the federal government, you have to find out which agency is best for you. So
right,
just like they're going to vet you, I think that you should be vetting that agency. Is this the right place for me? Am
right,
I going to grow in this
right.
agency? And I think sometimes small businesses are just so excited to get out there, they don't, they don't consider that.
Yeah, and don't stress yourself out trying to learn every agency under the sun. I've got a client right now that she is personally taking millions out of her business. She has one client. She has
Mm,
one agency, but that agency has 19 offices, and she's in 12 of the 19 offices. So don't be
mm-hmm.
afraid to go deep instead of wide. And so anybody in that agency that needs what she does knows that she's the person, and everybody recommends her. So she's really
Yes.
done almost no business development. She's been recommended to one office after another, and she is now the go-to in that agency when you need
Hmm.
this particular service. And so she's just hitting it out of the park with that. And
And
so
that's
that's why,
smart.
yeah. And so I
You can't
recommend,
be everything to everybody.
yeah, go deep instead of wide. The other thing, the mistake that I see people make a lot of times is they'll pay a consultant a ridiculous amount of money to get them a meeting with a senator or a very high level director in an agency, like the director of USDA or the director of whatever, or a four-star general of the over DOD or something wild like that. And while it's exciting to get the meeting, and you may pay a lobbyist or a consultant 10, I've seen people drop $75,000 on a breakfast before. And it just like my soul hurts. And I'm just like, what are you doing? And afterwards, they're like, nothing ever happened. I'm like, I
Because
wonder
they have
why.
zero part in the procurement process.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
don't have the warrant. They're not writing it.
Yeah, nothing. And
That's
so,
why.
so it's one of
Oh,
those things like, yeah, there's a lot of levels you need to know, and those are great, but sometimes we want to go to this top level and it costs a lot of money and time and effort and it doesn't go anywhere.
mm,
And so the people that we were talking about, the contracting officers, the small business rep, the program managers, those people are directly influencing you
yeah.
getting a check or not. And so that's where we need to be spending more of our time.
I definitely agree, and I'll say this: there is a I feel like there's a psychology to buying, right? And we have to remember that government employees are people too. So your contracting
Yeah,
officer, your program manager, your small business person, they have good days, they have bad days. So when you are approaching them, you should definitely I think take those things into consideration, and just like
yeah,
any other situation, that know, like, and trust factor is very important. So if you rub them the wrong way, um it won't go over well for you. And some people, they'll
sure.
do the minimum, but they're still people too. So you can't call them and harass, and why didn't you call me back? I
That's
called
right.
you 3 days ago. Excuse me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm putting you in a special file.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Right. Well,
and
and I
and it
always tell people,
happens.
yeah, I always tell people, your first impression is just like anything else in life. And if your first impression is you call me, I'm the contracting officer, and you won't stop talking, you're taking up 35, 40 minutes of my time. You're asking me to book an hour phone call. You're telling me what the FAR says on why you have to award money. Like, and you're telling me how to do my job. I'm like you said, it's the special file of,
Hmm.
yeah, Michael's, man, he is a jerk. And guess what? First impressions go a long way. I
They
only have
do.
one thing that I've really learned from watching the Shark Tank. It's my favorite line ever. I use it all the time. It's how it begins is how it ends. And people really understand that. And they see when something is complex, difficult, harassing, annoying, they just think that's the relationship I'm signing up with. And a lot of
Mhm.
people choose to say no. And
Yeah,
so you just got to understand that.
yeah. And so our next question is, should startups consider government contracting?
Yeah.
I think they can, but
Yeah.
it's the approach. Like, you can't expect to prime the first day that you're out there.
Yeah.
So you definitely need to get it, especially if you have no knowledge of the federal marketplace. I think getting in, I call subcontracting being someone's plus one, or,
Yeah.
to a dance. And it's
Yep.
always better to be someone's plus one. Sometimes you can get direct access, when you can't yourself, by trying to prime everything. So you just really need to, I think, when you get into, or you're doing your research on an agency, you need to know who the players are. It's not enough that you can do the work. Doing the work, that's the, being having those capabilities, that's the first step. But now you have
Yeah.
to get in and beat the people that's already in there. They already have their favorites, or those companies that are known to them. So now you have to kind of get to know, them, and get to know the customer. And so sometimes being a sub to someone that already has a strong footing within the agency is a great way to kind of
Absolutely.
ramp up, or, as you call it in your book, that growing fast. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think when I talk to a lot of companies, I deal a lot with the psychological aspects of being a business owner and a person and all this type of stuff. And when I'm talking to people, I'm like, look, the number one thing we got to check a lot of times initially is your ego. Let's check your
Mm,
ego,
yeah.
because from an ego perspective, you want to be a prime. I want to prime it. I want to do the work. I want to be in control, all those kind of things. And you'll get there. But if you just want to be a prime, it may take you a year to figure out the process, understand how to write an RFP, meet all of the clients, all those sort of things. It really might take you 6 to 12 months to win your first significant contract. But if you check your ego and you focus on teaming, like you were alluding to there, and when you look at your pipeline of opportunities, and say 70+% of them are teaming where you're the sub, that will allow you to accelerate into the market. And guess what? You get to learn from your prime. Your prime already knows the customer. Your prime knows how to perform work on a government contract. Your prime knows all of this stuff. So why not be their +1 to the dance and learn from them and win a contract in 3 months? And now you've got cash flow. You're understanding things. You're getting to know the customer better. And you accelerate this snowball of learning that has to happen, because that's really the challenge. When you start government contracting, there's this mountain of things you have to learn. But the cool thing is, once you learn them, they don't change very often. So once you learn it, you can ride that for years. You just have to either be really patient and have the cash flow to be patient, or if you want to accelerate, you got to find some teaming partners.
I think patience is the way to go. I see a lot of companies, and this is definitely not everyone's story, because if it was, or it's something that's repeatable, everyone would have, a similar experience. But some people are able to come in and really, really hit the ground running with just sheer grit. I think kind of
Right.
strong arm their way into an agency, but it's not sustainable. So definitely having a way to kind of responsibly scale your company. And I think subcontracting definitely allows you to do that. Because you have to be able to manage all of those contracts,
Right.
especially if you're in multiple agencies.
Right.
And it becomes very difficult to do that. Just the reporting alone,
Right. Yeah.
it's a
And
lot.
I,
It can take a lot to
yeah.
do.
And I recommend, when you're just starting out and you can only make so many phone calls a day, you can only do so much in the government world,
Mhm.
grow your commercial side of your business. Because guess what? The government wants to see that you have that going for you as well. So grow the commercial side of your business, get some past performance that way in the commercial market, and more importantly, some cash flow. Because the sales cycle on a commercial deal for just about any industry is under a month. In
Mhm.
2 to 4 weeks, regardless of what you sell, you can probably find some clients in the commercial space and close some work. Where in the government space, there's a process. So while
Yeah.
you're working on that process, close a few commercial deals, get some cash flow under your belt, be smart about it.
Yeah. And it's amazing that you have a lot of small businesses who um when you ask them about being in the commercial space, they really shun that. Oh, I want to be a government
Yeah.
contractor, but you have no past performance. So, and the government sometimes will allow you to use professional past performance, or the past performance of key personnel. But more and more agencies want to see that you have some federal past performance.
Right.
I was just in a debriefing a couple weeks ago with a client, and they had strong state and commercial experience, but the one thing that kept them out of this particular opportunity was that they didn't have the federal experience. But the contracting officer was really impressed by what they brought to the table. So now they're, on the short list for an upcoming opportunity. So, but
Yeah.
having that past performance is essential. So, what's your advice for people who don't have the past performance and they're
Yeah.
putting out there? How should we, highlight that in our proposals when we're going after
Sure.
these opportunities?
Well, one quick way to do it is through the teaming side of it. So that's why you choose teaming partners who have the past performance, number one, but also have contracts like you can physically check in SAM and say, hey, they've got contracts with this customer. So they not only have past performance, they have relevant past performance with the customer you're trying to go after. So that's one
That's
quick
the
way.
important part, the relevant past performance.
Yeah, it can't be like, hey, we want Army past performance and you've got Navy. Okay. Oh, well, why would I choose that teaming partner when I can choose one who has Army past performance? You just got to be
Hmm.
smart about it, and you can look at all up in SAM. So it's all
Yeah.
right there at your fingertips. The
And
other
also
side of it,
USA spending. I'm
or
sorry, USA
USA
spending. Yeah,
spending
that's a
is
good one.
fantastic. I like using USA spending a lot. The other side of it is understanding how to communicate your past performance. So I've actually seen clients who have very relevant past performance in the commercial world, But when we sat down I looked at a proposal, I said, well, you didn't have any past performance. And they're like, yeah, I mean, we've done some projects in the commercial world, but we didn't think that was relevant. And I start talking and going through it. And I'm like, this is exactly, I mean, it matches line for line, exactly what the government's trying to do. Why didn't you throw that out there? Oh, because it was commercial.
Yeah.
Like, so I had a client recently that was the opposite of what just happened for you, where they were trying to build a building for a government customer. And let's say, I believe it was like 3 or 4 floors, however many square feet it was. And they were like, well, we haven't done anything for the government, but we just did an installation for an AT&T building that was like 35 floors and all this stuff in square feet. And I was like, tell me more about the project. Tell me more about the project. Tell me about the metrics. Let's get into this. And so it's important to be able to understand how to map the commercial past performance to the government opportunity and clearly communicate this is apples and apples. It really is apples and apples. And in fact, we have done buckets of apples in comparison to this little thing that you have here. This is our whole life existence has been around doing this type of work in the commercial market at scale. Because a lot of times that's the challenge for the government. You'll say, well, we're a plumber and we've installed plumbing, but we've only done residential. And, the scale of that job is $10,000 or $15,000. And the government's saying, well, the scale of this job is $10 or $15 million. You haven't done the scale. So even if you have the exact past performance in the type of work, that's another area where they're saying, but at scale.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can do this level, but can you scale it? And
and that's what they want to know. You have to be able to demonstrate your, ability to do that. And people definitely struggle with that.
Yeah. So it's really just being able to map the past performance from the commercial stuff you've done over or your past life, your team's past performance, that sort of thing. But the one thing that I always tell people is they'll say, well, how do I do it? Because I don't have anything. And I'll say, well, you need a team. But I don't want a team. Okay, then you're not going to win. You're really trying to push a car up a mountain at this point, and you're telling me you don't like it. Well, I'm telling you, it sucks, but there's no way around it. There's no way around the hard work, but you're trying to find a way around the hard. Well, can somebody else push the car while I watch? Well, can you pay for it? No, I don't have the cash flow. Okay, you've boxed me in, and there's only so many things I can do, and you don't like the options. That doesn't mean they're not valid. And the valid option right now is the fastest way for you to win is to team. I know you don't like that, but that's the fastest way to do it. So do we want to be successful or do we want to be stubborn? And that's where a lot of times I have to say, let's just check your ego and let's go make some money.
So I call it, you have to learn how to crawl before you walk, right?
Sub dollars are the same color green as prime. They spin the same way, but they also have a lot less headaches. So.
That is definitely true. And I'll tell you, back to your point about making, showing that correlation between what you've done and what's being asked. I'll tell you that is so important because it definitely helps the contracting office. And I can tell you as a former contracting officer, when people clearly crosswalk their capabilities over to what I was asking for, it makes it so easy to grade or to evaluate that proposal because now, this person is giving me exactly what I asked for. So,
I guess one of if I was to give sort of a final piece of advice, one thing to remember, if you are finding yourself in a situation where you feel like everything you're doing is the hard way and it's not working, maybe you should stop doing it the hard way. Stop doing it and take a step back and say, okay, what's the right way or the fast way? Or how do I do this a little bit differently? Because I keep beating my head against the wall and I keep trying to force it. I keep trying to force the round peg into the square hole or vice versa, right? I keep trying to force it and it's not working. And that's an indication to you to change the way you're doing it. because
Right.
there are easy ways to get in and do this stuff, but sometimes we either don't know the strategy or we don't necessarily like the strategy, or when it comes to teaming, a lot of people have a lot of what I would consider unreasonable fears around it. And that's causing them from so like, well, if we win, I've heard from all my friends you're not going to get paid. Well, your friends were probably doing it wrong. So put a teaming agreement in place. Don't do it on percentage of work, do it on task area.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to do it right where you get paid because thousands of companies are doing it and it's working. So let's find the right way and let's address the unreasonable fears that stop you from going a direction that's working for a lot of other people. So
Well, Michael, I definitely want to thank you for your time today. Like you've given us, as they would say, you've dropped some jewels on us this
awesome.
morning. So definitely some priceless information. So how can those who want to get in touch with you do so?
The easiest way is through LinkedIn. So I would highly recommend go connect with me on LinkedIn. And I was like, what does my LinkedIn profile say at this point? I think it says win more government contracts, add me to your network. That's me. There's like a half dozen Michael LeJeunes out there. A couple of them do consulting. I'm actually connected to all the Michael LeJeunes on LinkedIn. And so I did that years ago because I want to know who they all were. But yeah, go connect with me on LinkedIn. If you've got a question, you can send me a message there and I can connect you to all the resources that we use, or anybody in my network. I'm very open about connecting people to anybody in the network that can be a benefit. So
Well, that's awesome. And I will definitely give you a plug here. I'll say if you don't have a copy of this book, Game Changers for Government Contractors, make sure you pick up a copy. I got
yes.
mine from Amazon. You can get yours from Amazon.
Yeah.
This recording today, we will be sending it out for playback. So if you miss anything, you want to run through it again, you'll definitely have an opportunity to do so. And if you guys are interested in connecting with us in the Growth Lab, the GovCon Growth Lab, please do so. We have a Facebook group where you can ask any questions that you have as it relates to government contracting. So our next webinar will be next month, September 9th, I believe, and we'll be having Miss Lisa Anderson. She's a virtual CFO with a novel transformation solutions, I believe. And so she's going to be giving us some additional tips on how we can raise the bar as it relates to our pricing and
Awesome.
just having or either going beyond the plateau. So I hope you guys will join us. You'll be getting an invite to that as well. So again, Michael, thank you so much. Thank you guys for spending your time with us this
Thanks for having
morning.
me.
Go get some lunch, right? It's lunchtime for some of
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
thank
Thanks
you
for having
guys.
me.
You're welcome. You have a
Bye,
good
everybody.
day. All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.